In 1975, Charles Scudder and Joseph Odom fled the bustling city of Chicago, Illinois, for a remote plot of land outside Summerville, Georgia. They purchased 40 acres near the Chattahoochee National Forest for a little more than $10,000. The locals whispered rumors that the land came at a suspiciously low price because of its dark history, rattlesnake bites, and mysterious deaths. To Scudder and Odom, this ominous reputation wasn't a deterrent, it was an invitation. The two men arrived with a vision. They would build a home with their own hands, and when they arrived at the property in the middle of a blizzard, they followed a rough trail into the wilderness where they discovered the decaying carcass of a horse, an omen of what was to come. They selected the place where their home would be constructed. It was surrounded by trees that appeared eerie and haunting, and therefore they decided on a name. Before the murders began, before they enshrined their home with pentagrams, satanic artwork, and human remains, they decided it would be called Corpsewood Manor. At the frayed edge of a town, at the yawning mouth of the forest, it was a place where silence clung to the trees, and shadows stretched too far in fading light. Scudder and Odom began construction on their isolated sanctuary, a place where they would live in search of a deeper truth. But on December 12, 1982, they encountered someone in pursuit of something darker. On that night, they learned that seclusion demands its own price. Charles Lee Scudder was born on October 6, 1926, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. His father, Charles Morrison Scudder, worked as an engineer, and his mother, Eleanor Lee Scudder, held a college degree, an uncommon achievement for a woman at the time. Raised in an affluent and educated household, Scudder's early life was marked by privilege and intellectual curiosity, a foundation that would guide his pursuits in the years to come. He attended the University of Wisconsin, studying zoology and languages. At 19, he married, though it didn't last long. His second marriage followed, resulting in 4 children. Scudder's career eventually led him to Chicago, where he began teaching biology at the University of Illinois, and continued his education at Loyola University. By 1964, he had earned a PhD in pharmacology and secured a position as an associate professor at Loyola's Stritch School of Medicine. During his time there, he served as the associate director of the Loyola University Institute for Mind, Drugs, and Behavior, and his work there involved government-funded experiments on psychoactive drugs, including LSD. Despite his professional success, Scudder grew increasingly disillusioned and restless. His sons grew up and left the home to pursue their own lives, and the marriage to his second wife collapsed. By the mid-1970s, he had fully severed ties with his family. His sense of disillusionment deepened into tragedy when one of his sons, Ahab, died at a young age. This heartbreak, coupled with Scudder's growing fascination with the occult, and a desperate need to escape the crushing weight of societal pressures, pushed him to the brink of abandoning the life he once knew. Finding the academic world stifling, he abandoned conventional ideas about religion and society, diving deeper into occultism and Satanism. It was during this time that Scudder began placing cryptic personal ads in publications like Gay Community News. These ads, often adorned with Baphometic imagery, caught the attention of like-minded individuals, including prisoners. Even before his move, Scudder was flirting with the fringes of society, perhaps because he shared their sense of alienation. His letters, dark and provocative, often included sexual content and nude photographs. Amidst the wreckage of his personal life, Scudder crossed paths with Joseph Odom, a man who would soon become his lifelong companion. Joseph David Terrence Odom, born on March 27, 1938 in Cook County, Illinois, led a life that stood in stark contrast to Scudder's. While Scudder was raised in privilege, Odom came from a working-class family steeped in hardship. His father, Connie Odom, had only a second-grade education and worked as a hotel linen boy, while his mother, Mary, had a fourth-grade education and took on housework when she could find it. Odom's early life was difficult, and by the 5th grade, he had dropped out of school entirely. His path was marked by legal trouble, leading to a stint in jail where he reportedly learned to cook, a skill that would later shape his role in the unusual partnership with Scudder. Despite his modest upbringing and lack of formal education, Odom's simplicity and practical skills endeared him to Scudder. The two met shortly after Scudder moved to Chicago, and he soon moved into Scudder's decaying mansion on West Adams Street, a home filled with strange and eccentric treasures, including a pink gargoyle fountain, which would later find its way to Corpsewood Manor. Odom took on the roles of housekeeper, cook, and constant companion. While the depths of their relationship remain shrouded in mystery, what is clear is that Odom became an essential part of Scudder's life. He shared in Scudder's intellectual pursuits and followed him into the murky depths of the occult. As their relationship deepened, so too did Scudder's yearning for isolation. He had grown tired of materialism, academia, and society as a whole. Scudder detailed his thoughts in a letter to a magazine a few years later. Furthermore, my house was no castle in the country. I lived in an old mansion in a decaying residential area that was more like a mausoleum, a tomb requiring care, cleaning, and endless costly repairs. I was plagued with taxes, light bills, gas bills, water bills, heating bills, and the helpless feeling that resulted from watching my old neighborhood disintegrate into an urban ghetto. There were other factors prodding me toward a life-changing decision too. I had a good job as an associate professor in a medical school, so I received a salary raise each year, but, of course, it was always more than swallowed up by inflation. And as time passed, the medical students grew more unruly and less interested in learning. The standards of the school steadily dropped, and my department became a hotbed of office politics, backbiting, and resentment. As soon as I got home each evening, I'd change into my old and not too clean or mended jeans and muddle about in the garden, finding there the only real moments of satisfaction left in my urban life. I was even pleased when the city's wildlife, the rats, drank from my garden pool at night. In such a melancholy environment, it was no wonder that I suffered, along, no doubt, with many others, from continual hankering, vexation, and apathy. In 1975, Scudder purchased a 40-acre tract of land in a remote section of Georgia, surrounded by the Chattahoochee National Forest. However, the couple did not immediately relocate. It wasn't until 1976, on Scudder's 50th birthday, that he finally resigned from his position at the School of Medicine. As he left the university, Scudder didn't depart empty-handed. He stole 3 vials of government-grade LSD, totaling over 12,000 doses, and quietly pocketed 2 human skulls from the institution. They lingered in the decaying mansion a little longer, auctioning off most of Scudder's possessions. He truly wanted to shed his previous life, including many of the old belongings that were tethered to memories of the man he had been. In January of 1977, beneath a severe blizzard, they packed what remained of their belongings. Renaissance-era furniture, a wood stove, a camper, and their Jeep were among the remnants of their old lives. The relentless snowstorm pursued them through most of their trip, cloaking the road in a treacherous white haze. The journey was grueling, with the pair losing their way often as the blinding snow swallowed the road ahead. Even in Georgia, they could not locate their property in the snow, and they were forced to spend the night in their vehicle. When the weather cleared the next day, they reached the land they had purchased, only to be greeted by the rotting carcass of a dead horse. They named the path Dead Horse Road. They found a cluster of barren, skeletal trees that stood eerily in the distance. Undeterred by this bleak welcome, they decided they would name their future home Corpsewood Manor. a name that echoes the haunting landscape and foreshadowed the darkness that would take root. The harrowing names were no coincidence. They were harbingers, whispers of what was to come, sealing Corpsewood Manor's fate in infamy long before the horrors that would follow. In the spring of 1977, Scudder and Odom undertook the arduous task of building their home from the ground up. Despite lacking formal construction experience, they were determined to create a peaceful, isolated retreat. With only occasional help from neighbors or passers-by, the two spent years building what would become Corpsewood Manor. They chose a design that was simple yet resilient. The manor was built with triple-layered brick walls, offering natural insulation, and kept the home comfortable through all seasons. It was a modest 2-story structure, approximately 40 feet long and 16 feet wide, with oval-shaped walls, a rare design choice that was believed to ward off evil spirits. The house had no modern conveniences, such as electricity or running water. Instead, they relied on a hand-pumped well, candles for light, a wood stove for heat, and a chemical outhouse. These limitations were not seen as hardships, but rather as essential elements of the life they had sought, a return to simplicity. Despite the ominous setting, their lives at Corpsewood Manor were deeply cherished. Both men, scarred by societal judgment and past traumas, found solace in their secluded life together. Their relationship, unconventional to many at the time, was one of mutual support and shared purpose. Scudder's intellectual background and growing immersion in Satanism found a steady counterbalance in Odom's practical nature and quiet loyalty. Together, they shouldered the physical and emotional weight of their new life, constructing a sanctuary, not just from wood and brick, but from the burdens of the world they had fled. The first floor of the house was completed by the end of that summer, allowing Scudder and Odom to finally move out of their temporary living quarters, which had included a flimsy tent and makeshift shelter. Scudder carved inverted pentagrams into the 4 chimneys of the house, and these symbols, enclosed in circles, contributed to the unsettling atmosphere of the manor. However, during the early days of construction, Scudder and Odom were involved in a car accident. Scudder was behind the wheel, with Odom as his passenger, when their car veered off the road. Details of the crash are sparing, but the consequences were severe. Odom suffered a leg injury, and far worse, serious brain damage, which left him debilitated for nearly a year. Odom convalesced at the manor. Scudder's background in pharmacology and medicine allowed him to provide care. He filed for disability on Odom's behalf, but despite his best efforts, Odom never fully recovered. He struggled to maintain concentration and follow conversations, and it left a lasting mark on his personality, with many describing him as quiet and disoriented. However, Scudder continued construction of the home while nursing Odom through recovery. Their retreat from society freed them from traditional constraints. At Corpsewood, Scudder fully embraced his interest in Satanism, becoming an official member of the Church of Satan, founded by Anton LaVey in 1966. The institution rejected conventional religious morality, instead celebrating individualism and self-indulgence. Rumors circulated that LaVey and Scudder corresponded by letter, though these claims remain speculative. No surviving letters have ever been documented. Nonetheless, Scudder's devotion to Satanic philosophy was unmistakably visible throughout their home. By 1978, the second floor was completed, transforming Corpsewood Manor into a fully functional home. Scudder, who had a passion for unsettling art, decorated the manor with creations that deepened its eerie atmosphere. One of his most striking pieces was a stained glass window near the manor's drawbridge door, featuring a chilling depiction of Baphomet. Beneath this window sat a small ritual cabinet filled with teddy bears, a disturbing juxtaposition of innocence and darkness. Another stained glass window bore the image of a Medusa-like skull, further adding to the home's ominous aura. Scudder's fascination with life and death was reflected in his paintings, particularly in a series flanking the entrance to the manor's spiral staircase. One depicted a baby emerging from a womb, while the other mirrored this image, but with the baby now skeletal and lifeless. This morbid imagery symbolized the duality of birth and death, reinforcing the unsettling nature of the space. Yet the most haunting of all was Scudder's self-portrait, painted after Odom shared a vivid nightmare following the car accident. The image showed Scudder gagged with 5 bullet holes in his head, a chilling and prophetic glimpse of what was yet to come. Outside the manor, the couple tended to a small pond, which they planned to expand into a swimming pool. They planted fruit trees and cultivated extensive gardens, growing their own vegetables and roses. They even buried an old refrigerator underground, fashioning a cool storage area to preserve perishables. They constructed a second building that became central to the infamy of Corpsewood Manor. The chicken house was a 3-story building that served multiple purposes. The bottom floor housed chickens that provided them with fresh eggs and meat. The second floor served as a storage space filled with canned goods. Committed to their off-the-grid lifestyle, Scudder and Odom preserved food to prepare for the colder months and potential emergencies. Yet this floor also concealed a more controversial collection, their extensive library of pornography, a detail that stoked the fires of rumor and scandal in the deeply conservative rural Georgia community. However, it was the third floor that drew the most attention. This upper level, initially known as the Pink Room, would later earn a more sinister name among the locals, the Pleasure Chamber. The room's walls were entirely painted pink, a color choice that added to the unsettling and surreal atmosphere. Instead of traditional seating, mattresses covered in pink sheets lined the floor, inviting guests to sit or recline in the peculiar space. Designed specifically for entertaining guests, the Pink Room was dimly lit by candles and oil lamps, casting flickering shadows that only enhanced its eerie ambiance. Within this space, Scudder and Odom kept an array of whips, chains, and other implements typically associated with sadomasochism. Much of the pornography stored in the chicken house found its way to this room, further suggesting that it served as a site for intimate encounters and entertainment. Rumors swirled that the Pink Room was the setting for wild sex parties. Scudder and Odom hosted gatherings for out-of-town guests, and on occasion, curious locals drawn to their eccentric lifestyle. The secrecy and explicit nature of what transpired in the chicken house only served to fuel the rumors. Many speculated that the sex parties involved high-profile locals. Although no solid evidence ever emerged to support these claims, the rumors refused to die, especially after talk surfaced of a guest book from the 3rd floor. This book was said to contain the names of visitors, along with compromising details and explicit photographs. While law enforcement confirmed the existence of the guest book during their investigation, it mysteriously vanished, leaving behind a cloud of speculation about who or what it might have revealed. By 1978, Corpsewood Manor was finally complete. The couple had laid over 45,000 bricks with their own hands, constructing not just the manor itself, but a brick gazebo, a towering 3-story chicken coop, a chemical outhouse, and a 160-foot well. Their property included a small lake, an orchard, and an expansive garden. The manor, surrounded by the haunting landscape, blended seamlessly with the bleak and ominous atmosphere. Its very foundation, built upon land steeped in tragedy. To the locals, it was a place of strange defiance, an unsettling symbol that stood against their beliefs and way of life. The reclusive men became objects of fascination and suspicion, their sanctuary an enigma that seemed to grow darker with each passing day. From the outset, Scudder and Odom's presence in rural North Georgia was a subject of curiosity, gossip, and eventually suspicion among the local townsfolk. Tryon, Georgia was a small, close-knit community, and the arrival of two eccentric northerners, one a former professor and the other a housekeeper, did not go unnoticed. At first, Scudder and Odom were well received by the locals. Known for their politeness and soft-spoken nature, the couple's eccentricities were overlooked by the tolerant townsfolk. Their remote, off-the-grid lifestyle, paired with their polite demeanor and self-sufficiency, earned them a certain level of acceptance. Deputy Bobby Gilliland would visit Corpsewood Manor out of curiosity, describing Scudder as charming and articulate, always welcoming to guests. Adding to the manor's eerie reputation were Scudder and Odom's two massive mastiffs, Beelzebub and Arsanath, who intimidated most visitors. It was rumored that these dogs were trained to block anyone's exit if they dared to step out of their car without permission. Surprisingly, despite their move to the isolated location to escape societal judgment, the couple was open to receiving visitors. Those who were curious or bold enough to make the journey up the mountain were welcomed at Corpsewood. Scudder, who still placed public personal ads, frequently entertained guests from his wide circle of pen pals. In some cases, he would even conduct medical exams on his sexual partners, relishing his role as both a mentor and a guide as he explored his newfound sense of freedom. As time passed, more of the town grew fearful of the two men, perceiving them as something sinister. The satanic symbols that adorned Corpsewood Manor, the pentagrams, the image of Baphomet, became sources of fear and speculation. Whispers spread that Scudder had invoked a demon to protect his estate, though these claims were more the product of superstition than reality. Scudder enjoyed provoking their curiosity. He would often say cryptic things to visitors, asking them, "Who am I?" rather than the expected, "Who are you?" His words, paired with the eerie atmosphere of Corpsewood, only deepened the sense of mystery that clung to the place, turning curiosity into suspicion and fascination into dread. In the fall of 1982, Kenneth Avery Brock traveled to Corpsewood Manor at the age of 17. He had heard local rumors about the devil worshippers who lived in a castle deep in the woods. When Scudder and Odom discovered him hunting on their land, they invited him in for a drink. Scudder, known for his hospitality, offered Brock his potent homemade muscadine wine. This interaction was the beginning of Brock's visits to Corpsewood Manor, where he partook in Scudder's offers of wine, drugs, and sexual encounters. Brock had a deeply troubled upbringing, shaped by neglect, hardship, and abuse. He described himself as having never experienced the typical milestones of youth, such as attending a job, concert, or serious relationship. He had grown up in a dysfunctional household where he faced abuse from his father, who eventually kicked him out. The emptiness of his past left him vulnerable, seeking connection wherever he could find it. The permissive and accepting lifestyle of Scudder and Odom offered something Brock had never experienced, an escape from the harsh reality of his upbringing. Despite later expressing regret and anger over the sexual nature of his relationship with Scudder, these feelings weren't strong enough to keep him away. He returned to Corpsewood Manor again and again, drawn deeper into the strange and intoxicating world that the couple had built. Brock soon found himself under the wing of Tony West, a man with a far darker past. 13 years Brock's senior, West had been shaped by tragedy and violence from a young age. When he was just 10, West's father died in a horrific train accident, a loss that left a permanent scar. His violent streak began to surface soon after. At 13 or 14, while playing with a friend's .22 caliber pistol, West pointed the weapon at his 2-year-old nephew, intending to show the child there was nothing to fear. The gun was loaded, and the shot killed the boy almost instantly, in full view of his horrified mother. Following the incident, West was sent to a mental institution until he turned 18. When he was released, he fell into a pattern of criminal behavior. He was caught stealing tires from a Jeep and convicted of larceny, eventually ending up in a county workhouse, a place he would later escape. While on the run, West got into a heated argument with his brother-in-law over a poker game. The confrontation escalated to violence, with West shooting the man. He was sentenced to 3 years for aggravated assault and served his time at Pikeville Maximum Security Prison, though he was released after 18 months. Over the following years, West would be treated 3 times in Chattanooga mental institutions before retreating to a derelict trailer on his sister's property in Walker County, Georgia. In 1982, he met Kenneth Avery Brock, and within a month, he invited the teenager to move into his trailer. Brock shared stories of his encounters at Corpsewood Manor, tales of Scudder's generosity with drugs and alcohol. Tempted by the promise of a free high, West accompanied Brock to the manor. West would later recall that Scudder and Brock had a sexual encounter, and Scudder attempted to involve West, who promptly left. Brock believed Scudder and Odom were millionaires, mistaking their isolation, eccentric lifestyle, and castle-like manner as signs of hidden wealth. He believed that somewhere within the manor lay a fortune, and he began discussing the idea of a robbery with West. United by frustrations and warped dreams of quick fortunes, the 2 men set their plan in motion. For Brock, the robbery was driven by a blend of youthful arrogance and a sense of vindication. Rage over his encounters with Scudder convinced him that the theft was not only justified, but righteous. West, on the other hand, was fueled by a lifetime of poverty, desperation, and bitter resentment toward a world that had left him with little more than a criminal record and a broken life. The irony was that their robbery was doomed from the beginning. Despite the appearance of mystery and wealth, Corpsewood Manor was a place of stark simplicity. Scudder and Odom lived on a modest budget of just $200 a month, drawing from savings that amounted to around $40,000, nearly none of which was kept within the manor. They relied on a checking account for daily needs, and their lifestyle was far from opulent. In a cruel twist of fate, West and Brock plotted for what was never there, seeking fortunes that did not exist. In early December 1982, Brock traveled to Corpsewood Manor for reconnaissance of the home, but was refused entry. Undeterred, Brock and West began preparing for their plan. They gathered supplies, including a .22 caliber rifle borrowed from Brock's mother under the guise of going rabbit hunting. With the rifle in hand, they made their way to West's sister's house, where they spent the evening watching football with her 19-year-old son Joey Wells and his date, Teresa Hudgens. The 2 men decided that bringing the young couple along might make their plan appear less suspicious and perhaps ward off any unwanted advances. With this in mind, they invited Wells and Hudgens to join them for a drive. On the evening of December 12, 1982, the 4 piled into Tony West's 1972 red Plymouth Javelin. They made a stop at a gas station to fill the tank and buy cigarettes, and it was then that West told the couple their true destination was the home of the devil worshippers. During the drive, the group huffed a toxic mix of paint thinner, glue, and alcohol, something they called Toodaloo. When they arrived at Corpsewood, Scudder greeted them asking for a cigarette for Odom before leading the group to the infamous Pink Room. They climbed the exterior ladder to reach the 3rd floor of the chicken house. Inside, they opened a jug of homemade muscadine wine, and the group reclined on the mattresses scattered across the floor. As the tension seemed to ease, Brock excused himself under the pretense of grabbing more Toodaloo from the car. He returned with the rifle. Scudder, unfazed and likely half drunk, laughed and said "bang bang" to seemingly defuse the moment. Surprisingly, Brock hesitated and set the rifle aside. The group continued drinking for another 20 minutes, but the calm was short-lived. As Scudder stood to adjust the flickering kerosene lamp, Brock sprang forward, pressing a knife to his throat. Attempting to defuse the situation again, Scudder coolly asked, "What kind of game do you want to play? I'll play your game." Brock threw him onto the mattress, binding his arms behind his back with strips of pink sheets. He demanded money, but Scudder calmly told him there was none. Frustrated, Brock bound him with more ligatures. Wells and Hudgens, terrified by the escalating violence, fled down the ladder. West, armed with the rifle, followed them, demanding they return. But he was convinced it would be better if they left. The trio climbed into the Javelin, only to find that the engine wouldn't start. West believed this was a sign that things were meant to happen. Reluctantly, Wells and Hudgens followed him back to the pink room, still begging to abandon the robbery. With frustration mounting, Brock left Scudder and approached the house, hoping to force Odom into giving up their imagined riches. Outside the door, he shouted for Odom to come out with the dogs. The moment the door creaked open, Brock fired without hesitation, killing the man instantly. The two mastiffs, curled peacefully by the wood heater, were shot next. West returned to Scudder, gagging him before dragging him back into the manor. When Scudder saw the lifeless bodies of his partner and beloved dogs, he sobbed. West, unmoved, shoved him past the gruesome scene and into the library, demanding to know where the valuables were hidden. Bound by hand and foot, Scudder tried to reach Odom's body, but West warned him coldly, "Sit back down or I'll shoot you." Removing the gag for a moment, Scudder responded with eerie calm, "I asked for this." When Scudder refused to heed the warning, West shot him 4 times in the face. With the owners dead, West and Brock ransacked the house, hoping to find the fortune they had imagined. Instead, their search yielded little more than a few coins, jewelry, a revolver, and other trivial items. Shockingly, they did not discover the LSD hidden away in Scudder's desk drawer. As they looted, West heard a low, strangled moan from Scudder's still-breathing body. Without hesitation, he delivered a final, point-blank shot to his forehead. Odom, too, was not yet dead. He had managed to crawl halfway into the dining room, clinging to life. Brock, spotting him in his struggle, grabbed Scudder's .22 caliber revolver and fired again. The two murderers left the house under the grim gaze of a self-portrait painted by Scudder, a haunting image of himself with 5 bullet holes in his head. Scudder had remarked in the past, "That's how I'm going to die." Chillingly, his prophecy had come true. Brock took Scudder's jeep, while West finally managed to start his Javelin. Together, they returned to their derelict trailer, attempting to intimidate Wells and Hudgens into silence. But the horror of the night had been too much. The couple would break down and report everything to the authorities, but not until after Brock and West fled through Alabama and Mississippi. On December 13th, they pulled into a rest stop outside Vicksburg, where they targeted a sleeping man in a nearby Toyota. They had decided it was time to switch vehicles. Their target was Lieutenant Kirby Phelps, whom they detained and forced into the woods. As they attempted to handcuff him to a tree, a struggle broke out, and West shot Phelps 3 times in the head, killing him instantly. They stole his wallet and vehicle, leaving his body to be discovered 2 days later by a Civil War relic hunter. On December 13th, 1982, Raymond Williams, a friend and neighbor who lived just 4 miles away, visited the Corpsewood Manor to inform the couple of a mutual friend's passing. He noticed the Jeep missing and assumed they had gone to town for supplies. When he returned the following day, he noticed the front door was wide open. He knew something was wrong and contacted the Chattahoochee County Sheriff's Office. The strange and chaotic conditions inside Corpsewood Manor, coupled with the presence of satanic paraphernalia, made the case all the more complex. Investigators unearthed black candles, cryptic occult books, and a disturbing assortment of whips, chains, and pornography. That same day, Scudder's missing Jeep was discovered abandoned in Tallulah, Louisiana. Inside, officers found .22 caliber bullets linking the vehicle to the crime, and investigators began to suspect West and Brock were responsible for the nearby murder of Lieutenant Kirby Phelps. As the investigation progressed, Wells and Hudgens, overwhelmed by the horror of what they had witnessed, eventually confessed. They revealed that Tony West and Avery Brock were responsible for the killings at Corpsewood Manor. The gruesome details quickly spread through the media, and the case gained notoriety. Soon, Corpsewood Manor became a haunted attraction, drawing looters and vandals. Once a secluded sanctuary, the property was overrun by those hoping to profit from its dark legacy. Local residents broke into the manor, ransacking it for anything of value. Rose bushes were dug up and replanted in local gardens, while small, easily stolen items like signs and pieces of the building were carted off. Some of these stolen objects, particularly those closely associated with the couple, were rumored to carry a curse. Many who took items from the manor reported having a streak of bad luck following their theft, leading to some returning the items in atonement. This eerie reputation only further amplified the public's fascination with the site. The chicken house, home to the infamous Pink Room, was set ablaze on January 5, 1983, just a month after the murders. Later that year, the main manor itself was burned to the ground following Tony West's trial. What was once a remote sanctuary had been reduced to ruins, with only fragments of the building remaining, slowly being reclaimed by the darkness. In 1985, a man named Bernard Schell purchased the 42-acre plot of land where Corpsewood Manor once stood. Intent on capitalizing on the site's grim infamy, Schell reached out to film production companies in hopes of bringing the events leading up to the murders to the big screen. The planned film, Murder at Corpsewood, was to be directed by James Budd, though it never came to fruition. Despite the manor's physical destruction, its haunting story continued to attract interest, keeping the dark legacy of Corpsewood alive. As the manor's remains were picked apart by scavengers, law enforcement made progress in the case. The witness testimony of Teresa Hudgens and Joey Wells led to murder warrants, and both men were soon arrested. The grand jury quickly indicted them. Brock, only 17 at the time with a less violent history, was offered a plea deal. He accepted life in prison to avoid the death penalty. In his February 15, 1983 plea, Brock admitted to shooting Joey Odom twice and planning the robbery, but insisted that West had been the one to murder Charles Scudder. West's defense team sought to discredit the victims, focusing on Scudder and Odom's Satanism and sadomasochism, painting them as social deviants. They hoped to sway the jury into seeing the murders as somehow justified. On March 8, 1983, after less than 2 hours of deliberation, the jury found West guilty on all counts. He was sentenced to death by electrocution. However, this sentence would later be overturned. In 1985, West accepted a plea deal for 2 life sentences, avoiding a retrial. Corpsewood Manor has been swallowed by the forest. Its ruins, a memorial to the men who fled from a world that feared what it could not comprehend. Many may have seen them as pursuers of darkness, their symbols of Satanism, but they encountered some in pursuit of something even darker. The forest has claimed the manor, but its tragic story still lingers. The air hangs thick with something unspoken, a lingering weight, like a storm that never quite arrives. The shadows stretch longer, with a whisper that there is no true refuge from ruin.